And welcome to another episode of the Gamerheads Podcast. My name is Roger. Along with me this week, I have two very special guests. I have Mike and Andrew from Strollart, the studio behind the game Below the Stone. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hello. I'm glad to be here. Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course.
It was great meeting you at Nick's and PAX in the past.
Yeah.
I talked with other people on your show before, like Jill from Indie Informer,
Yeah.
So it was really cool getting to be invited again to talk again. So,
Yeah.
I'm just glad to be here.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to have you back on the show, Mike and Andrew. Welcome, first time guest on the show. So welcome to the show. So before we get into the game, why don't you tell us about yourselves? What got you in? What's your role in the creation of Below the Stone, and what got you into gaming in the first place? And Mike, I'll start with you. What's your role, and how did you get into gaming?
Well, I remember playing what was it? I remember being on my dad's lap when he was playing Doom, and that's kind of what got me into things. Like I remember, he was at the computer. I was like, "What's that thing you're going, on your screen?" And he's like, "Oh, sit down." And he's just like, he has like invincibility mode, and he's just blowing away demons. And I'm like, "This thing is really cool." I want to make those.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of like I wouldn't say that was my first time being introduced to games, but that's like a big first memory, I guess you could say, of video games. And on Below the Stone, I mean, obviously, ever since then, I wanted to make games. Oh wow,
Yeah.
people actually make these things. So ended up doing a couple little side games until Below the Stone came around. And me and Andrew and many others have worked on this game, and we finally got to this point. And I was kind of very lucky that everyone, got very inspired to work on this, and very lucky that I'm surrounded by so many talented people who want to work on this. So yeah, I mean, that's my start with Below the Stone, my start of video games and all that. So yeah, I don't know, Andrew, do you want to take it off from here?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for me it was a little bit different because like my parents didn't. Neither of them were really into video games.
Hmm.
I don't know. Maybe my parents were probably like a little bit older than yours, Mike. So they never really. And my mom grew up on a farm, and my dad didn't grow up on a farm, but he kind of was in like a different situation where video games weren't really that available to him, I think. But when I was growing up, that became more of the case. So the first like games and computer stuff that I had as a kid, actually, even though just to be clear, because this might make people assume the wrong thing about me, I was born in 1997, but I have a half brother. I have a half brother that had NES games. So those are kind of hand me down NES games right there.
Nice.
So that was like the first kind of games I played. NES. The first, family computer was like a Windows XP, but there was also like I remember there was a Windows 98 machine right next to it, and sometimes I would play like if there was certain games that only worked on that one, I played like Lego Island or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of where it started with me, and then over the years, as new consoles came out, that kind of stuff. But the PC was kind of the prevailing like game system for me. Like I always liked other consoles and things, but the PC stayed. And over time, as a kid, I became slowly more and more fascinated with just the fact that like a computer, like I understood as a kid that this computer was this thing made in a factory. But I always thought to myself, like the stuff you see on your screen, like that wasn't made by a machine. Someone actually had to make the stuff you see.
Yeah.
And I wanted to understand how people made stuff that you saw on a computer screen, and then to a greater extent be like, well, what if I wanted to make my own things? How difficult or easy would that be? And it took probably until like middle school when I started to kind of get a little bit of hints of, oh, it's this thing called programming. And I started learning about programs out there that you could use to make games. So like probably 6th or 7th grade was when I started to get into it, but then not till like high school was like there are like a lot of available material where I could go, okay, I could learn Java, and then I realized, wait a minute, there's tons of resources on the internet for free that you could use to learn this kind of stuff. I want to do this.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much where it started,
That's awesome. I just had to laugh because I before the show I said that I'm much older than both of you. 1997, I was almost dropping out of college. I was missing a lot of classes because I was playing Final Fantasy VII. So yeah, that's where I was at. But how did you two meet then? Because like Mike, your background is like the art of the game, right? And the concept and stuff. And Andrew, you're the programming mind behind the game. Like, how did you two meet and decide like, hey, this is something we want to work on?
From a very special individual by the name of Dean Hall and Brian Hicks, who made a game called DayZ. We were surviving the wilderness of DayZ, and we happened to meet up in the wild playing that game, and we just happened to live near each other, and after knowing each other for a long time and just working on different things, we both had our interest. Like Andrew's very like technically interested in like video games and the creation of things, and I was very like creatively, like artistically driven, and I kind of got that from my parents. And like one of the things I had in mind was this game about dwarves and death and going into these caves spelunking. And I went to Andrew and I pitched that game. I said, oh, well, here's this game about dwarves. It's about dying. It's about mining. And I think there's like a invisible checkbox in Andrew's head that was like, tick, 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 tick. Dwarves, okay. Dwarf fortress, okay. Mining, okay. I think I like that too. And like just games Andrew happened to be interested at the same time, or the concepts he was interested in. And then we both started just working at this thing, and it grew and grew and grew into this bigger thing that we're both kind of involved in today now. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's very cool.
I would like to say that too. One thing I did. I'm sorry.
Fine.
So Mike's story was very short and succinct. I really loved it. But one thing I always like to highlight with the story is just the fact that this was only possible because of the internet, and number two, because of online games. Like
Isn't that crazy?
like the fact that like, yeah. And like, we're not like, I would say it's like a 2 or 3 hour drive from my house to his, just to give like a sense of distance.
Yeah.
And so like that comes down to the fact that I think like when we were playing DayZ and you pick your server, usually you want the one with the best ping.
Yeah.
And that just so happens to be the server that's closest to you. So I think through that virtue, we ended up being close to each other because of that. And then we met in game. So
that's crazy. That's so amazing. And just what a small world, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us about the game itself. What is, I know what Below the Stone is because I've been playing it, but for those of that don't know what Below the Stone is, why don't you describe what Below the Stone is?
I'm glad you asked. So Below the Stone, my friend, is a pixel art roguelike about dwarves on the quest to the deepest depths, a place where each and every descent will lead to new adventures, and where only the most determined dwarves with many lost lives will be rewarded by the world hidden below the stone. So that is
some deep lore right there.
In a way, so Below the Stone, what else is there to say other than that? Dwarves, mining, roguelike, going in, descending, risking your equipment from your previous runs to go deeper. It's all that kind of stuff. In my mind, it's like all the stuff that we've seen that's becoming more and more popular recently. This like idea of a extraction roguelike, this idea of like almost Tarkov-esque roguelike. Even games like Lethal Company are playing with ideas like this, like the idea of like an extraction style game. that's what Below the Stone is. So yeah.
That's awesome. One of the things that I really love about the game is the world that you are building and the lore behind it too. So can you talk a little bit about that? How did you go about creating the lore behind the game and the worlds behind the game, and what did that look like when it first started?
Oh, it was definitely like a team effort. There was a lot of like, I when this whole thing started, I had like vague ideas of what it was going to be. There's like in my brain, I guess there was like a rule book of like, okay, dwarves, death, mining, these things, right? And me and Andrew in the early days were kind of like, we would like spitball back and forth things, and like, I'd throw an idea at him, and he's like, and then he'd throw an idea at me, and I'd be like, and back and forth like that for a while. And at some point, and there's a lot of ideas that like when you're making a game for the first time, there's all sorts of things that like you go through. Like, okay, does this idea make sense for a game like this? I remember before there was a time where we were talking about like, I think we were talking about it for like a week. We were like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if you could like make a camp in the caves, and you could like get your gear, and you could like save your game and stop in the caves. And then we're just like, but why though? And then it's like, all right, and we'd like break it apart and like, does this really make sense for the game as it is? And you're also dealing with scope creep and all these other ideas when you're making a game. So there's definitely like a prototyping era outside of just the programming side of things, just like coming up with ideas, and eventually actually like me and Andrew working on the actual like first prototype of the game, and then slowly while he was like in college and stuff, and then eventually beginning like our first Kickstarter, and eventually going into where we are now. So
And part of that then, I mean, there's the journey that you guys had with this game too. Can you talk about how this game evolved in the development process? Andrew, maybe you could talk a little bit about like how you approach the design of the game and the development process. And then also, Mike, I think it's an interesting story about how you started Kickstarter and then you got picked up by Apogee, right? Is that, I mean, I guess let's talk about that too, because I'm real interested in that story. So Andrew, could you talk a little about the design behind the game first, and then we'll talk about the journey of that as well?
Yeah. So like in the beginning, and this I think is actually kind of important also to just the story of how Below the Stone started, like you were saying earlier. When it all started, the kind of thing where it sprouted, I guess you could say, is like the fact that before Below the Stone, I think this was like 2018, like summer of 2018, and I had discovered, and I knew about for a few years prior, about this engine called Unity Engine.
Yeah.
Various other games were made in Unity Engine, and I had during that time I had learned that it was free, so that you could you could, if you didn't buy the pro was still paid, but like at the time it was like, okay, if you sorry, hold on a second.
Hey, no, you're fine. Unity stepped in and said, whoa, hold on.
This is, the whole controversy recently, we can't get into all this.
They stepped in and said, no. Andrew, here's the talking points we're going to give to you. That's actually what happened.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
Yeah. So Unity was, I discovered it was free. So I was like, oh, this is cool. This is a good, like, I feel like this might be a good tool to, get better at my own programming skills, game design skills, and, see what I can do with this engine. And Mike noticed that, and he was like, oh, maybe this would be a good engine for making Below the Stone in. At the time, we didn't, like, we figured out the name Below the Stone as we were working on it. So it wasn't like in the beginning, but that was where it started. And so essentially what happened after that point was that I was like, okay, well, I think there weren't certain things that, like, when Mike pitched the game, that were necessarily like established. And they were things that, like, from my own personal inspirations from games, I was like, oh, I'd like this game to have these things. And so one of those things was that the game was procedurally generated and that it was destructible. So it was something like Terraria or Minecraft or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that came partially from, I think, my just desire to want to write code and kind of understand like how did other people do it, and doing it for myself for the sake of experience, but also because I like games where you can destroy, the entire level and things like that.
Yeah.
And then, I think like originally we had the idea of like it wouldn't just be mining, but there would also be dungeons and structures that you can find and explore and discover within these caves, right? And so that kind of makes it from a game where, if you imagine like Enter the Gungeon, where you're only inside of a dungeon, you're never outside of them. It now goes from like you're starting in the caves and you can find dungeons, raid them, and then when you're done, you can leave it and then travel some distance to another one within the same level, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're going to college at the time that you're building this game, right? Did you go to school for, if you don't mind me asking, did you go to school for like IT or game design at all? And secondly, let's start with there. Was that something that you studied in school?
Yeah, I just went to it was community college, so it was like a couple years. It was 2 years, but it took me more than 2 years to finish the 2 years worth of credits.
Yeah.
But it was computer science, so
Okay.
I did get the associate's degree in computer science, and that was pretty much it. After that, I finished it in 2020, and then after that point, I was like, all right, I want to go full time on, because that was when the Apogee, so everything kind of fell together at that point. So I went full time on just working on the game after that point. What was I going to say?
Working full time on the game, college, having, what was it, like your experience, your background of experience.
Yeah, I had a ADHD moment there where I just forgot my train of thought. But yeah, college. That was where, so I learned C++ in community college. Learned a good bit of that.
Yeah.
Prior to that, my education, like I said earlier, was like a good chunk like learning stuff from the internet, just self-learning, but also high school. Java was like the primary language in high school, so I got some experience there. So that was like most of it. And I think it was very valuable to be taking those classes on top of also supplementing that with, using YouTube as a resource and just using the internet in general as a resource to fill in the gaps of missing knowledge to make whatever I wanted to make.
Yeah. Well, I guess the reason I asked that is because, programming aside, because programming is one thing, right? But the fact that this game, the level design is fantastic. And the fact that like you didn't have I don't know, Mike, I don't know, maybe you have like formal learnings on level design, but to me, I think that's the most amazing thing is it's like how great and how wonderful the level design is in this game. And like, it's just from understanding, just be able to like see other medium and say that they did that. Let's see how we can apply it in our game. Like, to me, I think that's fascinating.
Well, that's definitely all Andrew, but I'll happily take the credit. But yeah, it's one of those things where like, if there's any important things to teach in game dev, it's like, I think it's going to be listen to what player input is and kind of listen to your gut a lot of the time. And we're all human, so instinctively there's some level of similar interest that other humans are going to have, right? So if you feel something is like not right, it's like, all right, there's a good chance that other people probably don't think this feels right,
Yeah.
And you could test your gut a little bit, be like, all right, let me hand this to my friend Joey and my friend Bill and my friend Jill over here, and we'll test things out. And okay, they're all saying that this feels good, so there must be some correlation there, right?
Yeah.
So there's like moments like that. And yeah, I think like we ended up getting something good because there was a lot of people who obviously I think Andrew and also like a lot of people along the way that helped us kind of get the vibe of the game and like, does this feel right? Does this feel like the right kind of experience? And yeah.
Yeah. I think that that's just the most amazing thing to me, and that the fact that, you know, and again, programming aside, because programming is hard enough, don't get me wrong, but the fact that then you have to also think through level design and how this is all going to fit together, and just like, to me, I think that's the magic. I mean, not that anybody can program, because programming is hard. I'm not saying that. I can't write code. I tried. It's terrible. But I do think that when you compare that with the level design and like building out something, like, to me, I think that is astonishing, and you guys did a fantastic job with this.
Thank you.
Yeah, appreciate it. I mean, again, it really, a lot of it is Andrew, and a lot of it is just the people who helped us along the way with getting to where we are, you know, just
Yeah.
play test, you know, go to shows, see what people think. You know, you helped us too with, you know, when you played the game and you told us how you felt about it, you know, we were taking notes. So, you know, so yeah.
Nice. Can we talk about the journey then? Because I think this is the other fascinating thing about your game, right? Because you started off as Kickstarter, and then you went with Apogee, right? And worked with them. So can you talk about that journey?
Yeah, you know, I'm obviously I know Andrew's kind of perspective on it a little bit. I'd like to hear. I don't know. I think people would like to hear his side of things too. We ended up like at first just having this Kickstarter that was very like it just from knowing where we are now and what we had then. That Kickstarter was very thrown together, right? At the time, we probably we wanted to see where this thing could go, and by just throwing yourself out there, sometimes you learn a lot, right? And we had failed that Kickstarter. We didn't quite hit the goal, and if anybody knows Kickstarter, what happens is if you don't quite make your goal, you don't get funding.
Yeah.
We ended up sending like a $10,000 goal, and we made 5,000 of that $10,000 goal. And despite that, like not hitting the goal, that was still pretty big for us, because there's a bunch of strangers out there. Excuse me. Bunch of strangers out there who ended up like funding this thing that we had created, who we didn't even know. These were complete strangers to us, right?
Yeah.
We had no idea who these people were, and they were like, hey, this thing is cool enough that we're willing to pay money for it, right?
Yeah.
And for something like that to happen, it's like, okay, we must have something here. We don't know what it is yet, but there's something here that kind of works. Let's keep going with it, right? And that's when publishers started reaching out, and all these other people started reaching out to us. Oh, keep making this game. This is amazing. You know, oh, I didn't get a chance to pitch in, but the next time you do it, I'll pitch in, you know, for sure. You know, all these people who helped us out, who were kind of telling us like, oh, this is great. We want to keep seeing more. That's all it took, you know. At the end of the day, that's all it really took. A bunch of people telling us like, hey, this thing's cool. Keep making it. So yeah.
I mean, but that must have been a little disheartening, right? I mean, at first it was like, oh, we didn't meet our goal, and like you could have just quit right there. But then Apogee did reach out to you and said, hey, let's make this happen, right?
Well, a lot of people do quit. That's the thing. A lot of people would.
Yeah.
And I think it was just you know, we talked about as a team. It was like, okay, what do we have here? We have publishers reaching out to us. We have like all these people who are now joining our community. We had like a Discord at the time that was really small, and now all these people are flooding in, and you know, we were thinking about it, and it's like, was this really a failure? You know, do you really define this as a failure? We have all these people flooding in. We have publishers interested. We have all these people who are coming to us. Is that really what failure is? I don't think so. Yeah.
We learned a lot from
I was gonna say, Andrew, what's your thoughts?
Like for one thing, like we were not really expecting any of that kind of stuff to happen. Like it was, like Mike said, it was quite a rushed process. We were, for that entire year, we were like, okay, like in the summertime, we were like, okay, we're gonna try to get the Kickstarter out by this month, and then we got to that month and we still weren't ready quite yet, and so then we were like, okay, next month, and then next month. So at some point, eventually, I think we started in like December of that year,
Hmm.
and it was very, in my mind, it was very like I was not really feeling confident with the fact that we weren't really good at our execution of things.
Hmm.
But at the same time, I was like, let's just, see how this goes. But by the end of it, all these things we learned, all these different things about like um, what happens when you do a Kickstarter. So to some extent, right, a Kickstarter can also be a really good way to do marketing because, for
Yeah.
one thing, if you think about it, you're getting a page on a specific website where people go to look for games to fund. So to some extent, it acts as a good form of marketing. So, like Mike said, we a bunch of new people discovered our game, and then through that followed us and said that they would want to try to back us again if we tried to do a retry Kickstarter,
Yeah.
which is what we did.
Yeah.
And then, of course, tons of publishers. Some of them, I believe, were not credible publishers, but many of them were credible publishers. And so that put us in a position where, we could go, all right, this is great. Like we have some good stuff to work with now.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I just find that also fascinating too, because I mean, especially now with like the challenges that I think game developers face, especially like, a lot of, I mean, the layoffs this year were awful, right?
Mhm.
Um and the fact that, you know, you both had the tenacity to continue this, I think it says a lot about what you believe in, but also a lot about you both as well, as creators, and where a lot of people would have probably said, well, that's that, and I'm hanging this up and I'm done with it. Like, I love the fact that you took it as a, hey, look at all the good that came out of this and we can actually move forward with this. So that's awesome.
Oh yeah,
um
yeah.
oh, sorry,
Oh
Mike,
yeah.
were you gonna say something about that?
I mean, last notes on this. I guess
Yeah, yeah.
the major thing we got from this was just like never look at the like if you truly believe in what you're working on, don't look at this as like a failure. Don't look at this as like anything like that. Look at it as, what did I learn from this? If
Mm,
the only time you fail is when you just give up entirely, when
mm,
you say like, all right, that's it, we're throwing in this in the trash, we're done. That's when you failed. When you succeed is when you learn from something and you use that knowledge for the next thing. So if we just
yeah,
decided to quit game dev there, that would have been a failure. If since we kept going with it, that's why we ended up here, right? Where
yeah,
we have a launch game, we're in early access, we're doing all this. So yeah.
yeah, yeah. um One of the things that I love about this game is the art, and just how cute all the characters look, and uh it's so great, and the fact that right now you have that the holiday
Mm.
event going on too. I was so surprised when I jumped in. I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. Like, there's Christmas trees all around, there's Christmas lights, there's Christmas presents under the Christmas
Mm.
trees. This is amazing. Can you talk about the approach of the art and the design behind the below the stone, and what inspired some of that art?
Yeah, I mean, I heard a term recently called uh genre dissonance,
Hmm.
and the idea of like something not 100% meeting the genre of something. So like we have this roguelike where if you die you lose everything, which sounds like a brutal Dark Souls like kind of thing. And then you have this
Yeah.
kind of cute face, like this cute gift wrapping around it that's like, oh, it's cute and fun and inviting. It's kind of like the Binding of Isaac thing a little
Yeah.
bit. A lot of people say
Yeah.
that for some reason. They say like,
Hmm.
oh, Below the Stone reminds me of Binding of Isaac, and I'm like scratching my head like, how like that those came. And I kind of get it too. Like I think it's more of like the feeling and vibe you get from it, maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what people are saying, and the roguelike elements of it. um but yeah, I mean, a lot of the like artistic style, I guess, of the game was more like this I mean, it was inspired. The visuals in the game are semi inspired by like Enter the Gungeon and Nuclear Throne and a lot of roguelikes. I liked kind of getting into roguelikes, and making it kind of our own thing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not the only artist on the project either. Matt is as well, and he brought a huge amount of talent to the team. So like, everybody on the team is like, in a way, like kind of chipping in with the art, just kind of like when we're making art, it's like this is like something where we're all kind of like chipping in like ideas and stuff, like, oh, we should add, to the Christmas update, we should add kobold cookies, and it's like,
yes,
all right, why not kobold cookies,
Yeah.
So there's like all these little things like that, so we're all kind of chipping in ideas, and just, yeah, I mean, the art where it is now was just inspired by a lot of the games we loved, and yeah.
Nice. Any challenges with incorporating some of the art, Andrew, into the actual game and the design, especially like with events like the holiday and throwing out the cobalt cookies, right? Like, was there any challenges with that? It was like, you want me to do what now with the art?
Well, I would say off the top of my head, like the most challenging things were things that aren't necessarily related to the holiday update. I would say, I think most of the holiday stuff, like integrating the art into the game, was not too difficult. The place where, like, throughout the entire development, where it has been the most struggle, and even then, even now, I'm not really satisfied with how it works, but it works, is just how the animations kind of work for all the sprites, because you can have the player sprite, and then the player can wear different armors and things like that.
Yeah.
But because all of the pixel art is hand drawn, it's like you'll have like one PNG with like the idle animation and this animation, and then you'll have for let's say the iron helmet, you'll have a separate PNG that has, basically, it's like you can overlay the helmet PNG onto the player PNG, and it fits in all the places.
Yeah.
And then that applies for all the other iron armor pieces, and that also applies for copper, tin, so on and so forth, all the other metals. So for example, if you wanted to, say, give the player a new animation, like, say, for example, like they're falling down a pit, like Zelda, you can fall down a pit, so so say you want to add that. Well, imagine you have like 20 different armor sets in the game, and each armor set is like, say, 3 or 4 different PNGs. Take that number, multiply it. You have to like do that you have to add new animations for like everything. So it gets, the amount of workload grows in a very inefficient fashion. So that's one kind of reality of what we're doing, but also with the implementation, using Unity. Like, if this wasn't using Unity has a weird way of how it does things. And so I had to kind of write my own code to say, okay, for this, like, this is the idle animation, and basically for like iron armor or for the player, they'd all try to use the same like data. I'm not gonna try to get too detailed. I'm trying to oversimplify here, but like I had to do a lot of stuff just to make sure that like anyone who was ever creating new animations for whatever new armor sets we were adding, that the amount of work that they had to do was as minimal as possible. Like, it didn't kind of grow as for each new armor piece and things like that. So it was quite a challenge for Unity. But if this was like, if we made our game in like not Unity, like if we made our own engine in like C++ or something, we could have written our own code in a more lower level custom way that made things a lot less of a pain for us.
Yeah.
So that was probably the most difficult thing.
This is why I also grit my teeth a little bit every time we have like every time we go to a convention and someone's like, you should add dodge rolls to the game. And I'm like sitting and I'm like, all right, so every piece of armor we're gonna have to redo. Every piece, we're gonna have to go through and add this for every piece of armor. It becomes like a very big task. It's like, it sounds so simple, just add a dodge roll, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that the interesting thing that you said there about the animation and just like the different sets, right? Is like you could have gotten away with, and a lot of games do, of like not making your character look different when they get different armor, right? That it's just like, oh, it's a stat. Your character still looks the same. The stats, though, are the thing that changes, not so much the look of your character. And the fact that the character does change the look, especially with like the holiday update too, like my character has a Santa hat on now, which is awesome, right? Like, to me, I think that uh puts so much more into the game. Like, I appreciate that as a gamer, but I also forget about how much work that is, right? That goes behind that. And that's fascinating to hear that, just like how much that does take into consideration when you're creating new sets and saying like, well, what is the animation going to look like? And like, to your point, Andrew, like, how do I make this that the animators don't have to spend a whole lot of time, that I can write my code around it, so that way it's not like tedious on them, that we can make the engine work for us. Like, that's fascinating.
Yeah, and there's probably better ways that we could have done it as well. Like this is like a lot of developing below the stone over time was like realizing, oh, wait a minute, I could have done things a certain way. And so there's
Yeah.
a lot of things that like, so for example, and this doesn't work perfectly, but for example, you could imagine like we could have had like a palletized system maybe where you
Mm.
have like armor sets, you'd have like one
Mm.
armor sheet, but the image itself would be, the colors would be designed in such a way that you could very easily like repaletize the colors. You could say this pixel color is going to be changed to this other thing.
Yeah.
And so then you could make that it a little bit more efficient where you just have to change one image and then like you don't have to worry like the colors of like copper and tin would be based off of some other thing, so it's a little
Yeah.
bit more abstracted. The only
Yeah.
problem, of course, is that if you want like armors, like I know, like so you have like iron armor, iron helmets, and tin helmets look completely different, so you
Yeah.
would still need separate. But that's just one example of what could be done better.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the game is in early access right now. Has any of the feedback you gotten from players surprised you?
The thing that surprises me most right now, is like a lot of people are like, man, this game, like, and I'll tell you what's interesting about this. They'll be like, man, this doesn't have a lot of content in it, and I'm thinking to and they'll
What?
I'll look at the review
Yeah.
and it'll say like 15 hours played, and I'm like, all right, well, we're in early access. If you got 15 hours out of this game, like, I will say, like, we definitely want that to be more, right? We want this game to be like you can play for 100 hours and you like haven't seen it all yet, right?
Yeah.
That's that's where we want it. But I think what surprised me most is like, there's some people that are saying like, they want to see more content in the game, and that's exactly what our goal is going to be. It's going to be adding more content from here on out. So when people there are people who leave positive reviews who say like, hey, I'm looking forward to the next update, and then there's people who like who put a bad review and they'll be like, oh man, I can't wait for the next update, and it's like it's like in a way they're both saying the same thing, right? They're saying we want more content. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, right? So I don't know if that quite answers the question directly of like the most surprising review that we got, or the most surprising like reaction we've got from players, but like a lot of it's just been like watching people play for like 50 plus hours and keep playing and keep playing and keep playing and keep playing, and it's like, all right, we got something good here, now we're just going to keep adding more, right? We're going to keep adding more and more and more and more and more. So this is just the beginning. This is the basement, this is the foundation. So we're going to keep going from here.
Nice. What about you, Andrew? Any feedback that you've gotten or seen that you're like, that was interesting?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's I hesitate because sometimes I hesitate on like if I should say like some of the interesting feedback, but it's like that's like what Mike said is like the big thing is like the game needs a lot more content, and that's something we obviously 100% agree on. we have gotten some feedback that is like, and I'm really glad to hear this type of negative feedback where people say like they might complain about the controls or like hitboxes or like some, or if they're saying something doesn't feel quite right in terms of like there were some people saying like the hitboxes were too big in some situations, and not everyone points that out. And so if that one person is saying like the hitboxes are too big or something's annoying every time a certain thing happens, then we can look at that and go, okay, well, let's look into this, because I relate to that understanding of frustration in a game. And a game should be hard, but there's a difference between being hard and frustrating. Hard is just like, well, that's what you want. You want a game to be hard. It's hard, but you know that you can get past that. But frustrating is just like the game is functioning in a way that like doesn't there's the logic doesn't connect together 100%. So like if a hitbox is bigger than the sprite itself, or if it's a slightly too big, then that could be annoying. Or if there's too many objects with hitboxes, then it makes it hard to kind of engage in combat because you're always hitting these solid objects, and that messes you up some of the time. So it's not super like surprising to hear that kind of stuff, but at the same time, that's like, I appreciate hearing the negative feedback because we want to obviously make the game better and make it less frustrating. So
wow.
Negative. Here's the thing: like a lot of people are like, they hear the word negative feedback, or they hear the word like, that people are like critical of something. Like to me as a game developer, I look at that as like, okay, people are invested enough to actually tell us this, and they want to make this game better by telling us this, right? So that's a good thing in my mind. It's not a bad thing when somebody says like, hey, the hitboxes on this are messed, all funked up. When somebody says that to me, I'm like, let's fix this. They're telling, they want this thing to be fixed because they like this thing enough to let us know. If they really didn't like this thing, they wouldn't tell us, right? They wouldn't be invested enough to let us know these things. So to me, all this stuff has been good because it's letting us know, hey, this is the stuff we got to fix to get this person the kind of satisfaction they want with this game, and that's what we're aiming for, right? That's what we want Below the Stone to be.
I love that. That's awesome. I think one of the things that I saw that I was like, oh, I know these guys, was I want to say it was like GameSpot, but I'm not 100% sure. But it was somebody that wrote saying this is one of my new favorite hidden gems, and it was Below the Stone. And I was like, wow, that was really cool. Has there been any moments like where you found your game and somebody is like, this is such a great game, I can't believe this, and like you're like a little taken aback about like, wow, I can't believe like, such and such outlet picked it up and like and said great things about the game? Anything like that? Any kind of like awe moments for that for you as well?
I remember reading Jill's like what she wrote about Below the Stone, and I remember that was very nice. I remember Splattercat covering the game as well on YouTube, and streaming the game later. And here's the one I remember. Not a super like crazy influential YouTuber or anything. Like not like oh my god, Asmongold played the game. It wasn't like that. But I remember hearing it was my mother linking me a video of the game. She like messaged me a link of the game and like, oh, this person had so many good things to say about the game, and like it was like a half an hour conversation of her just being like, oh, and then he did this, and then oh, and he was saying this, and like I remember hearing kind of like vicariously through her what this person's like experience of the game was. And I believe the YouTuber was Holy Blood. I think that was his name. And I remember her like just going through videos and like watching people play. And that's kind of where I got a lot of like this like very, it was interesting hearing vicariously through somebody else that they and it's my own mom, of course.
It's your mom, yeah.
Yeah, it's my mom. She's like, oh, I'm such a fan of this. I'm your biggest fan. Watching your videos and stuff. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's great.
But like, I also remember the OTK Expo thing that did have Asmongold, and I just remember going to a game convention, and it was one of the developers that works at a studio called Into Snow. I remember walking up to them. I was like, "Oh, hey guys, what's up?" I forget if I even said my name yet. I was just like, "Oh, hey, I'm one of the booths over there. I just wanted to say hi." And one of them turns around and you're like, "You're the Below the Stone guy," and like I had this Below the Stone mask on. I forgot I had this mask on.
Yeah,
and it was kind of like weird hitting like this, like just in the wild, being like seen by people and just being like hearing other people say the name Below the Stone as they're walking by at a convention or something.
That's cool.
It's been a weird experience, but it's very interesting. Like it's very cool to see people love the game and to finally have it out there. And yeah. I don't know if Andrew has anything to say on it, but yeah.
So what exactly was the original question in full?
Well, just I mean, was there anything like, were you surprised by any I guess, outlets or anything that like covered your game and you're like, whoa, like, we're on some people's radars? Like, was any moment like that for you as well, Andrew?
Yeah. I mean, Mike mentioned Splattercat, but like there were certain, I couldn't call it a surprise in certain situations because there were some people who joined our Discord. So there was Alexa that joined and was like, oh, I'm going to make, I don't know if they said they were going to make a video eventually, but they joined and I was like, I never heard of them, but I was like, okay, if this person's going to make a video, knowing me, like, I'm like curious, like how many subscribers does this person have?
Yeah.
So I remember like clicking on their thing, going to their YouTube, and I'm like, that's a lot of subscribers. I'm so glad we're here. I'm so glad we've made it. That person has a lot of subscribers. And then Splattercat, I think Splattercat has more. So then when I discovered him, I was like, wow, that's pretty, we made it.
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. Yeah, I love that. I'll ask each of you this question. What aspects of the Below the Stone are you most proud of and why? So Andrew, I'll start with you. What are you most proud of and why?
I'm most proud of the fact that like a lot of that, like I said a couple of times earlier, when writing a lot of the code for the game, it was like a lot of it was a kind of first time thing. Like, prior to Below the Stone, I had a lot of personal projects. And so there were like projects of being like, oh, it'd be cool if I could make this program or make this game or something like that. And so I had those little personal projects that never quite finished, but they kind of served as a way for me to help with my own experience learning programming and things like that. And there were certain, like, there's a lot of different things you can practice when programming. And so procedural generation, pure procedural generation, like the way it works in Below the Stone, was something I didn't have a whole lot of experience with. I started to get a little bit more during like that year, but then Below the Stone kind of became this thing that allowed me to go, okay, like, let me try to learn a lot of these things right now. And so, if for one thing, this is, I think, of all the things in Below the Stone that I'm the most proud of because of what I just mentioned, is that if you think about it, if you have a level that's very large, right, these things, there's walls, you can collide with them, right? So you need to have, the CPU has to do computations to check if you're colliding with those walls. So you don't want the entire level and all the colliders of the entire level to be active at any given time. You only want a small portion of that.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, okay, I need to make sure that I can only load parts of those levels. And so, like, what approach should I take? And so I thought, well, the only example I can think of is like Minecraft with the chunks, right? So I'm like, okay, their approach, their way of doing it worked. So I'll just base it off of that. I'll do chunks where the level is broken down into pieces, small finite pieces that are like a power of 2 in size. And you know, and then you have to go, okay, well, which pieces should you load and which pieces should you unload as you move around the world. And so it's the
Yeah.
same idea, but the thing is I'm doing this for the first time, and
Yeah.
when I was doing it, I was also kind of questioning if I was doing it correctly or if I was doing it the
Yeah.
same way that Minecraft was doing it. But then I realized, well, that doesn't matter. Each game is different. I'm just trying to, you know, use a solution. I'm just trying to solve a problem, and I'm basing it off of the way that this other game did it, because it obviously works for them. It's a game that I've enjoyed playing for many years, so it comes from that. And so I would say like that, and
Mm.
along with many other things like the inventory system and just the procedural generation of the level itself are things that I'm very proud of, because I like procedural generation, and also I just am proud of the fact that I was able to kind of get through these types of things. Like normally I would say I'd rather practice doing certain things like chunk loading or but a lot
Yeah.
of that stuff I just kind of jumped into it head first with Below the Stone,
Yeah.
and I made it through, so I'm
Yeah.
proud of it.
Yeah. That's awesome. Mike, what about you?
I think the thing I'm most proud of is the team. I think it's everybody who made this game what it is now. It wasn't one person. It was everybody who came together to make this.
Hmm.
So that by a long shot is the thing I'm most proud of. I think if you were just, I know the question was framed in more of a way of like what the game itself, right? Not just like the development of it, but I think that would be my number one answer. And if you're looking for more something in the game, I would say more so like just the like the watching people play for like 50 plus hours, seeing somebody playing and just having fun,
Hmm.
and seeing that and watching people enjoy the game, that is something I've become very proud of. So I think both of those are like my top two. If you were to break it down into like your top list, your top tier list, I think that's the top things I'm proud of this game.
Nice. Nice.
I think also
Yeah.
oh, sorry.
No, yeah,
uh
yeah, no.
One thing that like I think Mike can definitely agree, this is something that he would also be proud of, is that like if you look at like what the pixel art for the game looked like in the beginning versus
Mm.
what it looks like now, you can kind of like see a nice like historical progression of it, and I think that's really cool. I think Mike should definitely be proud of the fact that like his art has evolved so much just from like
Mm.
2018 to now. It has changed so much, so
Mm-hmm.
you know
That's
Yeah.
true. It definitely has changed over time, and a game's constantly evolving, right? So, this has been like a many years progression of making a game. So there's a lot of history that went into like I wouldn't say quite as much history as something like Dwarf Fortress, right? That's been in development for like multiple decades at this point, but enough that like we could you can have like archival knowledge of Below the Stone. There's like Below the Stone lore masters out there on our Discord who are like remember the days when like, oh, remember when this was in the game, or remember when like they were doing this in there, like, and you're kind of one of those, right? Like at the
Yeah,
first
yeah.
packs,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what it was like at the first
Yeah.
packs, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's awesome. So you're in early access right now. I know you're also planning to bring this to Switch as well. So can you talk a little bit about what's next for Below the Stone? I don't know if you can give too much of a roadmap, but what's next for Below the Stone?
Yeah, I think like what a lot of people have been wanting is they want to see layer 1 and 2 fleshed out more. They want to
Mm.
see a lot more things to do on those first layers. And that's what we're going to do first. Before we go any further, any deeper in Below the Stone, I think we're going to see a much more fleshed out, a much more in-depth layer 1 and 2 before we go further and decide to delve deeper below the stone. So when we're doing layer 3 and layer 4 and layer 5, that's what's going to be coming up after we polish off layer 1 and 2. So
Nice.
we're looking at maybe doing like NPC side quests, going into like the idea of like more meta progression stuff for layer 1 and 2. Yeah, just the stuff that we wanted to have originally that like, yeah, I think that's where we're gonna go. Just fleshing out the game more of what exists, and then we go deeper. So yeah.
Nice. I have to ask, Mike, how many digging puns do you have? Like,
do you really want me to pull out the list right now? You know, Andrew's got his list, but yeah, he has to write them all down. So. Yeah.
I just had to laugh because like every year, like, and we're gonna go deeper, below, dig deeper, and I just it was delve farther. Okay, Mike, it made me laugh really hard about all the different digging puns you had there. So that was great.
You pick them up over the years. So.
I'm sure you do.
Get it? Pick. Anyway.
Oh man, I wish I had my drum set.
Yeah.
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 How can people follow you guys on social media? Like, I know you guys have Discord. You're on social media as well. Where can people follow you and I guess become part of the community?
Yeah, I mean, Twitter at Below the Stone. If you go on belowthestone.com or Strollart.com, whichever one fits your purpose, you can go there and you can wishlist us. You can buy the game now. You can follow us on Twitter. Go on our Discord. Our Discord's very active. That's where we do a lot of our big updates and stuff. So if you're just somebody who wants to dig into some Below the Stone, that's where you go.
I would also say one thing I think that's nice to mention also is we're going to try to start doing a little bit more like maybe you did say this and I missed it because I was thinking about it, but like we're going to try to do more Twitch streaming in the next year,
nice.
like dev streams. It might be me, it might be other people on our team as well. We're going to try to do that more for marketing. So I think that's if anything, any of you listening that like, you know, be sure to, you know, keep an ears out for when we do Twitch streams because we definitely, you know, want to, you know, engage and talk with you during the streams while we work and things like that. So
yeah, very cool. Well, guys, it was really fun having you on the show. I really love this game. And Mike, it was great to have you back on the show and seeing you again. And Andrew, thank you so much for joining. I'd love to have you guys back on the show when you come up with more content and you want to like talk about like cool events that you're doing in the game. Love to have you back on the show to talk about that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, again, very much appreciate being invited back. You know, it's always great to speak with you. And it's always great to be a part of this. I hope we can meet up again soon as well at one of these PAXs. So, yeah,
very cool. Well, guys, thank you so much. And listeners, I'll put in the show notes links to the Discord, to the website, to the Twitter as well. So that way you can, and the Steam page as well. So you can wishlist it and get the game. So that way you can follow Below the Stone and become a member of the community as well. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a wonderful night, and we'll talk to you later. Bye.